Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Even Better podcast. This is Sinikka Waugh, and on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we are so delighted to have you join us. This podcast is part of our ongoing mission to help you have an even better workday. And as part of today, I am so delighted to have Kristen Boldt with us. Kristen, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
This is a joy. For those of you who do not know Kristen Boldt, I am so delighted to introduce you. Today, you can find her at Harmony Law DSM. She is she's a lawyer, but she doesn't like to think of herself as a lawyer. She specializes in this concept that I have become aware of as collaborative law, but she will be able to talk about it so much better. And one of the things that I just delight in about Kristen is her willingness and her understanding of how relationships work and how being present in the moment and understanding how we can be in the moment with someone and understand who they are and how we can bring our best selves to the conversation and how they can bring their best selves to the conversation and how we can work together through communication and through healthy relationships. And we don't have to be adversarial. We can be in relationship together, even if we don't agree on everything, even if we don't perhaps see eye to eye on all the things that we would like to see eye to eye on. We can still be in relationship together and we can still be good humans together. And Kristen, I have enjoyed getting to know you, and we met through a networking group somewhere along the line. And I've enjoyed reading your posts and being involved in conversations with you and having conversations with you over lunch and over coffee, and your ready smile and your musical illusions and your musical abilities and your harmony, of course, that you bring to the conversation, really seeking balance in our lives and in our relationship and in the ripple effect, if you will, the understanding that the conversation that we have here and now does create a ripple, and it does create that resonance in the rest of what we're doing in our lives. And I think that's why I want to be in this conversation with you right here and right now, is because you, like I do, and like so many of our listeners do, understand that the conversations that we're in various moments are not just impacted by the one that we're in right now, but they're impacted by the one that we had yesterday and the one that was before. And so if we can work really hard to make this moment right here a good one, it'll have a ripple effect into the next one and the one after that and the one after that. So with that, tell us a little bit about who you are, Kristen.
So yes, I do have a law degree. I like to call myself a tensegrity artist, and this was something, it's a great word, but tensegrity in nature or in art is this idea that we create and we build through balancing tensions rather than compression, like stacking things on top of each other. So when you look at tensegrity in art, it kind of looks like it's floating. Like it is this balance of different tension cables. And so as a metaphor for relationships, the tensegrity is this multi-directional give and take that we are always in. In relationships and interactions, everything is always this back and forth as we seek to balance our different needs, our different cares. And so what I do in my work, and almost all of my work is just as a neutral, whether it's a mediator, facilitator, trainer, is to help people find that balance so that we can create harmony. Harmony in music, as you know, is the blending together of different notes, but you don't lose what the note is. An A is an A, a D is a D, but we blend it together in a way that we build something bigger. And even when there is dissonance in the chord, it doesn't destroy it. It's just the path you go through to find resolution. So there's a lot of lovely musical analogies. Mm-hmm. And the tensegrity is just this act of building harmony.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. So as we talk about this, that idea of that tension and that give and take and the idea of tensegrity, part of this is going to appeal to some of our business analysis folks who are listening to this podcast right now, who are very much systems thinkers. And I think you are also a systems thinker, right? It's not just right. It's not just a thing. It's not an isolated moment. This is a moment, and it's part of a system. And how does the system work together, right, to make a healthy whole? You're an Iowa girl, right?
I am, yes. Born in Des Moines, graduated from Roosevelt, went away to college, went to Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was a lovely 4 years that made me realize I'm a Midwesterner. So I came home, went to law school at Drake, and so have raised my family here. I've got two girls that are now college age. And so yeah, I'm an Iowan at heart.
Yep. And you, my dear, are part of why I love this place. I did not choose Iowa for the weather. I just want to go on record. I did not, of all the places that I've lived in my life, I did not choose Iowa for its brutally long, very, very cold winters. I did not choose it for its unbelievably hot summers, but I did choose it for people. I did choose it for the Iowans with their neighborliness and their hard work ethic and for the harmony that people like you bring to the table. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So as we're talking today, you're talking to us about 5 ways to build conscious leadership. Let's set the stage for that a little bit, because some of our listeners are leaders and some of them are not leaders necessarily, right? Some of our listeners are going to be influencers, maybe in their own right. Maybe they are not necessarily in a leadership role in their listening, but does that mean they can't build conscious leadership in what they're doing?
No. And so actually, I am a big believer in this concept of leading from every chair. And so in the conscious leadership, you said, I'm a systems thinker. I love stepping back and looking at the whole picture. That's where my instincts go. And so it's creating space for this healthy environment where people can really live into their full selves. It creates a system for that space and for people to share their gifts and work into their higher selves, rather than like, all right, we have this little box. We need someone to fill this box. But when you put that person in a box, it's leaving some of their gifts out of it because it's limited. So it's learning to create that space really from a servant leadership standpoint that encourages the gifts of everybody.
Lovely. Lovely. Okay, so we have 5 ways to build conscious leadership. All right, so the first one is getting into a mush mindset.
Mush mindset. Yes. Well, so that refers to that it's the image of a chrysalis. So there are butterfly flies because it was forgotten, it was a caterpillar. So in between, there was kind of that mush. We have to forget some of what we knew. We have to forget some of the old assumptions, the old expectations, because as the world changes, we need to change with it. So we need to be willing to enter a little bit of mush and relearn and be present and observe the new and not get stuck in, it has always been this way. So if we want to be innovators, we have to be willing to look at things in a new light. So that's the mush mindset, is being willing to kind of enter that chrysalis so we can come out the other side.
I can only fly if I forget that I was once a caterpillar. Oh, that is fascinating. I love it. I love it. That's beautiful. Okay, so number 2, to seek understanding.
Yes. And seeking understanding is not just understanding of others, but understanding of ourselves. So part of what happens in that mush is we can start to, as we do some of that inner work of inner exploration of what are really our values, what are the things that energize us, what are the things that really make us feel alive, is we can start to differentiate perhaps from what we were expected to be and who we're meant to be. Because those aren't always the same things. We get a lot of messages from families and teachers and media and friends and all of the world around us. We're just getting constant input all the time. So a little silence is good, but doing some of that inner reflection, we start really finding what's our light. What's this thing that I'm here to share? So seeking that understanding, and when we know ourselves better, then we are more open to knowing others and to modeling and creating space for them to start finding themselves too. There is always more to every story than what we see on the surface.
For sure.
I have a wonderful colleague out in California, and I love his quote. He said, "We don't have relationships with people. We have relationships with the stories we tell ourselves about people."
Oh,
And so if we want to change the relationship, we need to change that story, and we can do that through seeking understanding.
absolutely. As you first started talking about seeking understanding, I was thinking about the book I recently picked up, one of Brene Brown's, The Gifts of Imperfection. And the very subtitle is "Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are." And so that interesting idea of that, I think you were talking about who are we really, right? Who do we think we are versus who are we really? And in a lot of the emotional intelligence classes that I teach, it's like who are you showing up as? Right. So who do you think you are now? Who do others see when you show up in the room? And are you showing up the same way to others as you think you are? And what is that self-awareness? Do you mean to show up that way? Do you think you're compassionate, and are you showing up as a compassionate human, or are you barreling right over other people when you talk? It's really interesting. Let's talk about that. So as you're thinking about the ways to build conscious leadership, do you have any techniques? Do you have any favorites for seeking that understanding? Because you've got two pieces here, for ourselves and for others. Let's do the self-awareness first. Any favorite self-awareness exercises, favorite self-awareness approaches?
Yeah, so in part of the work that I do, there's an element called conscious contracts. So it's a different way, a relational way to write agreements. But one element that has evolved from the practice is called it's developing your personal touchstone, your values, the thing that gets you excited, what you love, what gets you out of bed in the morning. This your drivers. This is what really lights me up in the world, is that touchstone. And then the other piece is this operating manual of me. So when you write this out, it'll say, here's how I work best on a team. Here's how I prefer to communicate. Here is my best working environment. Here is what I can contribute. Here's what you're going to see when I'm stressed. Here is how you can help me when I get there. So when we do this with teams, what we found is before you can build this whole system with a team, we need to know who we're working with, because it needs to match them. There's no one size fits all. The beauty of these conscious systems is that it looks at who is there and designs a system based on who's in it. So you're really taking advantage of or are meeting the higher selves that are there and crafting your conflict resolution, your communication policy around what people need. So that when we'll do this, we'll say, you kind of tell on yourself, because we all have this thing that we do when we're stressed. It's not a great thing. So here's what you're going to see when I'm stressed, and here's how you can help me get back to that higher self. And I'm going to do the same for you. We think of policies and systems we have to just control, and this is how we're going to manage everybody, and it's very kind of structured.
Yeah.
Relational says, no, if we build trust, if we go deeper and build those relationships, then you have a much more adaptable, responsive community or system that can handle anything, because we know each other and we know how to deal with whatever comes at us, because we know how to meet each other. And so that's been a really interesting thing to watch. We did a training. We had 22 people from 7 countries.
Oh, wow.
That has been the cool part of Zoom and this community, because it's international, that we get to bring people around from all over. And it's fascinating to watch people connect, because you really see that common thread of humanity come out when we're talking about ourselves on that level, because what is most personal is most universal, because we're people. Yep. And so you get to see that it really kind of gives some hope when there is so much it feels like so much conflict in the world. It's like, no, but it's because we're all separated. And so we need to start finding our way back together, and rebuilding that trust is how you bring people together.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Thinking about that, seeking understanding, and both of those examples that you just shared, I mean, that's getting understanding of ourselves, but it's also pointing to how we get to understand others as well. And I imagine that's got to involve some listening and some closing of our mouths and some, paying attention and some
very much
willing suspension of my interpretation of who you are and my willingness to listen to who you say you are.
And to ask questions. What I'm hearing is being reflective. What I'm hearing you say is this, and letting them say if that was accurate or not, because we do hear things differently. We all have our filters that are created just from our life experience.
Yeah.
And so being open to the fact that my filter may not be accurate to somebody else's life experience. So letting them kind of help me make that shift. And there's no need to agree on anything because we are sharing our authentic selves. We don't have to be alike. We can mutually respect. There's no need, for agreement. There's no right or wrong. We just are. We are who we are. And when we are comfortable in our own self and being able to present ourselves authentically, it's more relaxing because we're seen and we're heard. And so it makes it easier to see and hear others and want to seek that understanding because it's kind of a cool thing when you do that work with yourself.
Indeed. Okay, my friends, if you are just joining into this podcast, you need to hit pause and go back to the beginning and hear the beginning because we are here with Kristen Boldt and we are talking about 5 ways to build conscious leadership. Now, as Kristen pointed out, this is leadership from any seat. This does not mean you have to be in a leadership position or an authoritative position. In fact, it is servant leadership. It is from any seat. And number 1 was getting into the mush mindset, and you've got to go back and hear this because you won't understand otherwise. The second one was seeking understanding. And now we're moving on to the third, which is look for the needs, not the positions. Kristen, unpack that one for us.
Yeah. So we have a tendency to position ourselves. I believe this, and this is my truth. And we kind of battle about the positions that we hold rather than looking at the needs that those positions are trying to fill. So there are some basic needs we all have: the need to be heard, the need to be understood, the need to be seen the way we see ourselves. There's always a need that we're trying to fulfill. The actions that we take are an attempt to fulfill that need. And so sometimes we can be trying to get to the same place, but we're going from different directions. And so you kind of hit head on, and then you argue so much about my way versus your way, you forget that we're trying to actually get to the same place. And so that's where changing our language becomes important. So learning to observe without judging, without placing a story on it. The trash didn't get taken to the curb. I could say, daughter forgot to take the trash out because she's lazy or she's watching YouTube or whatever the thing is. All I know is the trash did not make it to the curb. I don't know anything else. We automatically assign that story to it.
Yeah.
So learning to step back and peel it down to that old just the facts, ma'am, just getting down to what actually happens. Then speaking to the need, again, without any judgment. I will feel better if I know the trash is down the night before it's going to get picked up. That's my need, is to have that comfort so I'm not scrambling in the morning. And then making the request in terms of a need, again, without placing this blame, shame, judgment, you're not, you're lazy, oh, you never. That's always going to be an overstatement.
Right.
The only absolute is that you should never use absolutes because it's always an overstatement. But learning to step back and go, okay, what's the why behind it? What's the why behind this action? I had an experience in law school, a friend of mine who's an older student who had kids. And one of them it was ADHD. And she said she would, ask him, why did you do that? And sometimes when they explain why they did it, she goes, oh, I see why at your age you thought that would work. That was not an unreasonable assumption to make that would be the cause of the series of events. So then we treat it differently. It's an educational experience.
Right.
Instead of being judgy, it's like, oh, you weren't being bad. I get what you were trying to do. And so looking for the need is that why. What are we trying to do? What's the need we're trying to fulfill? Because again, those needs are going to be more, when you really get down to the core, those are the universals. So learning to speak to just the facts, to just the thing that is, speaking from our own needs, not making assumptions about others, and then making a request, again, based on fulfilling our needs. This is the need that I would like for you to help me fill, rather than speaking in terms of blame and shame and judgment.
Yeah. As my head went to, as you were spelling that out, my head went to an example as concrete and as simple as you're disrespecting me by interrupting me. And that's what we do. Like so-and-so interrupted me and they disrespected me, or they disrespected me. They don't respect me. They keep cutting me off when I talk. And there's that story, right? It's the story that we're telling ourselves about that other person, when really the need is, if I don't get to finish my thought when I'm having it out loud, I forget what it was that I was saying, and I'll never be able to get back to that thought. I really need to be able to articulate my thought either out loud or on paper. I need to be able to finish that thought, because I remember years old, and if I don't finish it, I'm never going to be able to get back to it.
Yes.
And being able to articulate that need then without all the baggage, without all the respect or disrespect or noise or rude or interrupt, like even a language like interrupt is a baggage word.
Yeah. And the irony is, the person doing it may have the same need, because something that you have said has sparked a thing in them that they want to get out before they lose it. And so you are both trying to make sure that you, because you have such a good interaction, you're sparking so many ideas, you want to get the thoughts out, but we're both be challenging to hold on. So maybe it's a notepad in there. Maybe there's something else, but now you're talking about, oh, we both have the same need and the same challenge in meeting it. So how can we help each other?
How can we help each other? And so now we're walking around with sticky notes and pens, or we're in a Zoom and we're using the chat window and writing down keywords instead of cutting each other off and then feeling disrespected or inventing emotions that simply don't need to be there and cluttering up what is otherwise a really vibrant relationship.
Exactly.
Love it. Love it. All right. So let's get to number 4. So 5 ways to build conscious leadership. Get into the mush mindset. Seek understanding. Number 3, look for the needs, not the positions. Number 4, co-create the next step. Let's talk about that one.
So there is no one page. There's kind of in the old leadership model, it is hierarchical, it's top down. Here's the one page everyone needs to get on. Well, that one page generally serves the very few at the top. Usually means I need you to get on my page. It's not usually our page. And so when we co-create together, there was a great imagery that I read that said we're crossing the river by feeling for stones. It is this act of co-creation that says, okay, we have come together, we understand each other, we trust each other. What is the next step we can take? A clear next step, you might say.
I love it.
That is going to help us meet the needs that we have, whether they are individual or shared. And so by creating this space of co-creation, we get more focused on the destination. We're meeting the needs along the way. What can we do that is going to help us both without taking from either one of us? So there's no need it's a yes and rather than either or. We tend to think in terms of either or. The legal system does this a lot. That's why I don't like working as a lawyer, because I don't like picking sides. I don't like the either or, because I intuitively look for the yes and, which is an improv theater term, right, that you work with whatever you got. So you go, okay, yes, I have this, and I'm going to add something else. And so you keep adding, and so you are co-creating together, and now you start working together to build out the next leg of the journey. But you may only see so far ahead. You may not have the final destination, which is okay, because that keeps you in the present. I have a colleague who is in Canada, and we were talking about teaching, and she said, I'm really only like a week ahead of my class. But she said, that's okay, because if I'm farther ahead than that, I'm not with them. Mm-hmm. And so when we really focus on that co-creation, being present with each other, you're present with the needs, which can be ever changing. Mm-hmm. Maybe there is something new, and so we're going to be more adaptable in the present than if we plot out this one page, this one plan, this is it, this is all it can be, and we're all going to, charge ahead. When we're co-creating together, we're more adaptive and responsive, and we stay more current to whatever life is throwing at us. That's one of the things we've learned in the last 2 years, is life's going to throw some curveballs. We have to be able to adapt. And if we don't have that relationship, we don't have that ability to be responsive and that trust to co-create something new on the fly, it can really bog you down. It'll send you into that stress, fight, or flight mode.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna I'm going to hang out here for a second because I think as a
Okay.
career project manager and as an organizational change leader, I've got some of our listeners who are sitting up in their seat going, wait, Sinikka, you're going to push back on this, right? So there's a part of me that is going to push back just a tiny bit, only because I think you've already answered it. And I think you've already answered it with the conditions. Yes, and yes, we are feeling our way across the river by feeling the stones, right? We're finding our way to the other side by feeling the stones. And I love the imagery there. I don't know that I got the quote right, but the imagery is really beautiful. And you also just pointed to the level of trust that has to be there, right? There has to be a foundation of trust. And the analogy, I teach a college class in the spring semester, and being about a week ahead of the students makes really, really great sense. Assuming that I also have a curriculum, assuming that I also have a basic understanding of where we're going, big picture, I've got a big picture roadmap of what we're trying to accomplish. We've got learning objectives, we've got a roadmap of the class, and in the details, I'm about a week ahead for the details of that specific course. Here's where I think that for organizational change initiatives or for big projects or things where we're trying to do something or co-create something big, scary, novel that we've never done before, I think we can do it a little bit at a time together, feeling our way, when we have agreed to some foundational principles, when we've got some core values that we agree to, or some, I think you called them conscious contracts before, where we've already said that we are not going to take anything away. I'm not taking something away to feed me, taking something away from you to feed me, or taking something away from me to feed you. We are both going to come out whole in the end. And we've got some basic tenets that we agree to before we start finding our way across. Is that fair?
Yes. So in conscious contracts, we call that our touchstone.
Okay.
So that is that shared values and vision and the big audacious good we're going to do in the world is how I like to think of it. So in the conscious contracts process, you create that touchstone. The second thing we create is called an ACD. It's a process to address change and engage disagreement.
Okay.
So that gives us that communication plan. That how do we work together? How do we want to talk through this? It's building that trust and that understanding so that when we get a curveball, we know how we're going to work through it to make sure we stay aligned with our touchstone. And so from there, those are the first two pieces. That's kind of the bookends, because in between are all the action steps, the practical things that we're going to do when there's disagreement, when there's something that comes up. We have that trusted process that's going to keep us aligned with the touchstone. So yes, when you're looking at organizational, this big, cool, novel thing we're going to do, you do want to I love Brene Brown's painting done, like paint what that looks like. But if it's novel, it's new. And so we can't predict how we may start and go, oh, this thing, and it's kind of a cool thing that happened, but it's not what we were expecting. And so you've got to be able to adapt. Because it is novel and new, but you still want absolutely that painted done of here's where we're going, but also be open to when you're doing something novel and new, something really cool and new may come out of it that you weren't expecting, that you want to be open to having those adaptations.
Right.
When you have the trust, that's the conscious leadership. So when you have the trust, you built the systems that when those happen, whether it is a global pandemic throwing things out of whack, or you have the other side of, oh, this is way more popular than we anticipated, and now we have to produce, twice as much, whatever it is, that you have your conscious system in place, that you have the trust and that you can work together well and adapt to whatever it is because you've built those relationships.
You bet. And at the end, because way back at the beginning, I painted this picture of what it was going to look like. And I painted it before I was there. And in the end, it doesn't look exactly like that, but it has this set of characteristics, these set of attributes that I held true all along to these set of attributes. And these were my guiding principles, if you will. And while the details may be different, and the nuances, and I may have more purple and a little less blue and a little more green and a little, seven of these things where I thought I was only going to have two. At the end of the day, these guiding principles still hold true, and we honored them just like we promised we would.
Yes.
Okay. Phew. Okay, so we are on to step number 5. We're here with Kristen Boldt talking about 5 ways to build conscious leadership. Get into a mush mindset, seek understanding, look for the needs, not the positions, co-create the next step. And step number 5, repeat. What?
Yeah, it's a little rinse and repeat because co-creation is an ongoing process. So you always want to be asking those questions. As you've developed along this way, as you're traveling down this journey, be aware of, what is in our next phase? Is what we've done before really great and it's just going gangbusters? Or are there things that we need to tweak? What do we need to do? Has something gotten out of balance so one side's going stronger than another? It's going through that, letting co-creation be an evolving process. And so, because you always want to be asking those questions to make sure that you are current and present and mindful to your team, to your organization, to making sure that you're still on the end path of heading towards that same big audacious goal, that we're still doing what we need and we're adapting to the current environment, but being open to that. So co-creation, reflection becomes a part of our daily life. And it just becomes a part of who we are, which makes us more flexible. Because it makes it easier to be around, which is probably an overstatement, but it creates this lovely environment where people feel welcomed and seen and acknowledged, and imagine the energy that we unleash when we have this space where people feel like, oh, I can bring my light to this, to join with other lights and really shine something bright in the world. That's a lovely place to be, and it can take you places you don't anticipate. So you want to be open to those new opportunities and those new creations that evolve out of the first creation, because it is that ripple effect. That is, I always say that I'm the pebble in the pond. I am going to help you get on this path, but the really cool part is where it goes from there is just endless possibilities.
Oh, Kristen, this is really lovely. And this is not just theory, right? These are not just ideas. You have actual stories where this idea of conscious leadership has actually worked. I mean, you've seen this happen.
Yeah, I have. And this is the conscious contracts movement, and the integrative law movement is global. There are people all over the world that are doing this, and it's very grassroots. There's one woman, J. Kim Wright, who really started this, and she's spent the last, 10, 20 years just traveling the world training people and connecting these other people that are trying to bring lights into the system. Some of my local stories, I had a mediation with, it was a municipality, and we had, so I think they were electricians, as I recall. And so they brought me in because these guys were fighting, and HR said, well, these are our rules. These are our standards. They just need to agree to these standards. And I smiled and nodded because I thought they can read. That is not the problem. They know what your standards are. That's not why we're fighting. And these guys have been fighting off and on for 7 years, but they kept them because they're both really good at what they did. So like, well, they're smart guys. You kept them because they're smart guys. Let's treat them like smart guys. So I met with each of them one-on-one, a lot of spewing and a lot of little cussing and a little, it's like, okay, just let it go, bring it down. And eventually what came after that, after we had that emotional release, I learned that professionally, they had a tremendous amount of respect for each other. They knew they were the 2 smartest guys in the department. Personally, they just irritated each other. So I brought them together, and I mean, it wasn't bad things. It was stupid, like smushing up the toilet paper roll and sticking it through the locker. Like, you're 40 years old, but okay. But anyway, so I brought them together, and I started asking questions that I knew would elicit this common respect. And as we did that, we started building some bridges between them. And I finally said, listen, when things go wrong or when something comes up, how do you guys want to handle it? And they said, we want to talk to each other, because they weren't allowed. Because HR's thing is everyone just stay away, like separating children. Just go to your corners, which does not stop the conversation. It just makes it go in our heads. And when we run these conversations in our heads, the other person is always absolutely nuts. So it's not just we are perfect and they are insane. Like that's how that goes. So we're just letting that fester. And I said, okay, so we wrote up this 1-page agreement that essentially said, how they wanted to be able to handle this like adults and go somewhere private and deal with it. Well, about a month later, I get a call from their supervisor and his supervisor who said, what did you do? The whole department feels different. And they said, everybody's getting along. Like there's just this weird tension's just gone. I said, yeah, I let them be part of the solution. I let them create their solution. Whole reason you put up with this goofy fights for 7 years is they're both really smart guys. Mm-hmm. Treat them like really smart guys. Let them be a part of this. You have to meet people where they are. The other one, this was on the family side, I was mediating a divorce, and they came to me, and I again did the one-on-one meeting before we came together. And in the one-on-one, I realized I don't really think they want to get divorced. And so but they were having the same fight over and over for years, and they were worn out. Kids were grown, were exhausted. And so when I brought them together and I said, I think you do not want to get divorced. I think you would like to stop having the same fight. And if you want, we can talk about that. And then if we don't figure it out, court's not going anywhere. You still have that option. Well, as we dug into it and we started looking at their needs and their conflict style, one was a fighter, one was a flighter. Mm. And so, one needed to discuss things right away, because if we don't, it'll get pushed under the rug and never dealt with, because that's what my family of origin did. And the other one didn't want to get pushed into something because they were afraid they'd speak out of emotion and put their foot in their mouth and inadvertently make things worse. Well, so we started talking about those needs, and which are both very understandable. Mm-hmm. They both actually want those. They're seeking those needs for the good of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so we literally devised a script. It was, I had not done my conscious contracting yet, but I was doing an ACED. I was doing a process to address change and disagreement. And we had a script of, okay, when something comes up, you're going to say, all right, I hear you. I'm going to go for a walk, but I'll check in 30 minutes. And you're going to let them go and not worry about it, because they're going to come back and do the check-in. And either you're ready to talk or you need a little more time. But it created this balance. And now they both knew what the other needed, how they could meet each other's needs. And they ended up staying married.
Oh,
it was really sweet.
Oh, that is really
because
sweet.
They weren't in that rut anymore. And so it was seeking that understanding. And we got into a little bit of, oh, this triggers me because my family always did this, and I don't want to repeat those mistakes. And it's those stories. Yep. So we were able to change that story. We were able to find a way to address both their needs so that the relationship could continue.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. If you are listening and you have just joined in, you are way, way late in the game. You got to hit pause and go all the way back to the beginning. We have been talking with Kristen Boldt, and we're talking about 5 ways to build conscious leadership. And she's taken us through these 5 ways and just some great personal stories, firsthand stories of how these ideas of building conscious leadership make a difference. Took a whole department through a 180, like completely turned them around and changed the dynamic, and helped a couple who didn't want a divorce in the first place, it turns out. So they just changed their stories so they weren't in a rut anymore. Just beautiful stories. Thank you. So Kristen, this would not be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask my trademark question. What's one thing that's making you even better these days?
So I was thinking about this and how to phrase this, but it is really being focused on mindfulness. It is being conscious of giving myself some quiet time each day out in nature is very soothing, and surrounding myself with people that have good energy, that has a similar energy that I do. This let's make the world better, which is why it's so lovely to hang out with you, because you're one of those people that when we talk, it's like, oh, if we can help people in this area of life, then it just spreads to everything else. And so finding people that align with your energy, and then taking some time just alone to be reflective and just reconnect with nature is very soothing.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Kristen. What a joy to have you with us today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, yes, thank you for having me.
This has been a joy. So to all of our listeners, thank you for joining in today. I hope this has been useful and you found something that you can take away. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.